Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm checking out the GB90 from gearbest.com. This is a brushless micro with a difference. So it's called the GB90, which means that it has got a frame with the motors 90mm apart. However, it does look a lot bigger than that because it's one of these designs that has a cage around all of the propellers, very similar to the design of the Flex RC Owl. But you might notice that if we take a look at these circles here, they overlap. And that is why I've chosen to check out this model, because I've not seen this done before. Look at that. The propellers here overlap each other. And you see, these caged frames can be a problem because usually we have standoffs in the middle here, and the propellers usually have to be cut down, or we use very small propellers. But in order to get around that, they have staggered the motors, can you see there, so that this model can have 3-inch propellers. They are 3020. And as I say, they overlap, they do come very close, so hopefully they won't hit each other, but that's what I want to try out in the flight. So of course we have one motor down at this side and then one upside down, and then same again the other way around. So don't know again if that is going to cause an imbalance with the flight characteristics, but it's interesting nonetheless. So this model has got DYS motors. They are 1104 4000 kV motors, and there isn't really any direction on what battery you should use with this model, but the specifications are saying that this motor will take a 4S. I'm not going to be using a 4S, I'm going to be using a 3S for a couple of reasons. The first one is that all of my batteries that are for micros have a JST connector, so this is a 3-cell Nanotech 450 milliamp battery. Now this model actually comes with a XT30 connector. You can see I've had to lob that off there and solder on a JST connector. But I can see XT30 becoming the standard for these micros because we're just asking a lot of current from them these days with all the power and everything, and we're getting a lot of brownouts and flips and unusual behavior, and ESC's resetting. So hopefully it's going to fly okay. We don't have an on-screen display on this model, but it is powering up the receiver, the camera and the flight control, which I'll talk about in a bit. So you can see there that the ESCs are also staggered as well, and they are 12 amp little b BL Halley ESCs. So again, the specs say that it is good for 4S, but I wouldn't risk 4S with this. I think even with an XT60, I think 3S is probably going to be the limit there, especially with 3-inch props as well. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting about the way they have built this is there's no power distribution board. They've gone old school with it, and that's okay because it means it's a lightweight setup. So it weighs 87 grams without a battery, then 126 grams with this 3-cell battery. However, it means that it's very difficult to tap into the VBAT, and they haven't connected the VBAT up. So the flight controller is a SP Racing F3 flight controller. It's under this nicely 3D printed hood here. So this is a plug and fly, so you do have to add your own receiver. So I have added this little tiny S-Bus telemetry receiver here, and I found it difficult to connect it to the SP Racing F3 because this 3D printed case sits very close. You can even see there I've had to make up a connector to plug it into the UART2 there. Usually you would plug in an S-Bus receiver on one of the side ports of the SP Racing F3, but it won't fit because these bolts get in the way that's holding in this 3D printed case here. But it looks of good quality. I've just managed to cram everything in, so yes, it's on the UART 2 here, and then I just had to move it one along on the pin there so that I could get the S-bus working, and then that just plugs into a little Pico connector down here. Another thing I thought was interesting, now as there's no power distribution board, they have linked up a BEC, and then that just sits under here as well. It looks like another ESC, but it's not. It's a BEC to power up the flight controller, because otherwise we're just getting direct voltage into there, and this flight controller needs 5 volts. So yep, there's a little BEC in there as well. And to get this cover off, we just have got a couple of hex screws there, and then this just lifts off, and there's also a hole in this little plate as well, and that is for the camera to feed through. So the camera is powering off the flight controller. That's my only worry, that we have a camera and we have the S-bus receiver powering off the flight controller. Hopefully I won't get any brownouts because there's no on-screen display there. So they have taken all the signal wires from the ESCs, and those are just plugged in under here. Now sadly the flight controller came flashed with Clean Flight. I've gone ahead and flashed it with Betaflight because I tend to find that it's just going to be easier to tune, especially with this strange setup. I have no idea how it's going to fly. You don't get a lot of other stuff with this. This is everything that you get. So we have got this Velcro strap under here. It's one that doesn't have a feed through, so I always find it quite difficult to get the batteries in tight, but if you sort of crisscross them, then you can do that. Also, the battery is going to sit diagonally. There's no board alignment with this, however, funnily enough, so the flight controller is sitting flat on top. It's only the battery that is going to sit at an angle, so I hope that doesn't upset the weight distribution. Now, one thing that does concern me about this model very much is the strength here of the carbon. It is so thin, and I'm not seeing any spare parts for it. I'm sure there will be some somewhere, but oh, it looks so weak there. And in the middle there is a standoff as well. It's a aluminium standoff like one of these, and hopefully that's providing some structure there. But usually with this type of model we have standoffs all down here to strengthen it up, but we don't have that with this one. Something that might be interesting with this model is trying some of the Rotor X props, because these 3-inch props are known for vibrating quite badly. So I'll have to see how it flies with that. The camera that you are given is the FX798T, so it is 25 milliwatt and 40 channel, and you get given this holder with it here, and again 2 screws, and that just screws in there. The angle is not adjustable, and this sits quite loose, so I've had to take 2 of my own cable ties and put that around the top there. So as I say, you are going to need a battery, so I'm using the Nanotech 3S battery there, and I have bound it to my Tyrannus Plus.
Welcome to Tyrannus.
And set up a model. So there's no buzzer on this one. Now you could attach a buzzer, but it's all very tight in there, so I didn't do that. However, as the VBAT isn't connected, you could only use it as a lost model alarm. I mean, you could find a way to connect up the VBAT, but it would be a pain, and I think people buying this sort of stuff ready built don't want to mess around with that. But you could if you wanted to. There's a buzzer slot on there, at least for a lost model alarm, but no battery telemetry. So I've set this up pretty simple. I've just called it the G90 there, and then this particular receiver is in D8 mode, but of course because it's a SP Racing F3 you can use any receiver that you want. So let's page over to the inputs. I just set arming up on channel 5 on a 2-position switch, and then I've got my mode on a 3-position switch there, and then that again is mirrored in the mixer. So of course you're going to need a way to FPV with this, and I'm going to be using my Fat Shark Dominator HD3s just so that I can use the DVR here to show you the footage. And of course I'm using a Fat Shark Diversity receiver, Menace RC patch antenna, and a Onway Cloverleaf antenna there, and that does match the polarization of this camera, which is right hand polarized. Okay, so here we are in the Betaflight configurator. You get this from the Chrome App Store. As I say, I've already flashed Betaflight to this model. The SP Racing F3 has a bootloader solder pad, so if it goes wrong then you can solder that up and play about with it. I didn't have any issues with it. So it says COM3 at the top there, so let's connect to it. So you can calibrate your accelerometer here. I'm going to enable expert mode. I'll just take you through a couple of the settings that I changed as it was on clean flight. So as I say, I'm using the UART2 for the receiver. Just have to move the S-bus pin to the last pin on that little Pico connector, and then it works. So under the configuration we have quad X, and you can see no board alignment, which is unusual for a model like this. And I've got one shot 125 enabled. I've got motor stop turned off so that the motor spin up when I arm. Got the min throttle set to the stock Betaflight numbers, and that seems to be fine here. So VBAT's enabled, but as you can see nothing comes through, so we can pretty much ignore that. So serial based receiver for my S-bus receiver there, and all this is just stock settings, so obviously we don't need RSSI on there, although this receiver does transmit RSSI. We don't have an on-screen display or anything. So current meter also enabled, but doing nothing. Like I say, all just stock settings down here. So let's go into the failsafe, set to drop out of the box, which is standard these days for Betaflight. PID tuning, now this is just a bit of a guess. I've just tweaked the stock PIDs. It can be a tricky thing to tune these models with the cages, so that may change. Actually, I need to bump up my super rate. I've just noticed I like to have it a little bit more sensitive than 0.7. So yeah, I'll have to come back and change that if I have any issues. So let's just save that setting. So receiver, so the receiver I don't think is going to power up unless I plug a battery in. So I won't do that for now, but we will check out the BL Halley configurator to see if it picks anything up there. So TAER for my Tyrannus into the modes. So set it arming up on AUX 1, and then I've actually set it up like the Aurora series. I've been liking this. So you've got acro and no air mode, and then you've got angle mode just for safety, and then you've got acro and air mode together. A lot of these little models fly better on air mode because the descent is better. No beeper of course because I don't have one installed. Now motors, I did have to calibrate the ESCs with this model. So the way that you do that is you unplug the battery, tick this here, put the master to full, plug your battery in, and you'll get the magic tones, and then bring it down and make sure that you take the props off to do that. Then again, this model does have a cage, but you could still hurt yourself with it, so I'd still say take the props off with it. So we don't have any LED or anything like that. So let me just take you into the CLI and show you. I'm using the latest version of Betaflight, so let's just disconnect that, and then let's see if it's going to pick anything up in BL Heli configurator. You might notice I moved over to the Chrome version. So let's just take a battery here and plug it in. By the way, this model does fly on a 2S battery, but it's really sluggish, so I would say go with a 3S. But I'm actually plugging a 2S in here at the moment, so let's connect to it, see if it finds anything here. Read setup. Yeah, and there we go, so it's just BL Heli. See there it says little b 12 amp. I like how it tells you the spec. A lot of these all-in-one ESCs and that, it doesn't tell you the spec on here. So 14.9 there for BL Heli. This is one of those days where it's really windy and you really shouldn't be testing out an experimental aircraft for the first time. But let's do it anyway. Starting off in angle mode. Let's see what happens. It's in the air. It's going okay so far. Let's try the punch. So it's not bad, you know. It's not crazy, but it's not bad. Having to fight it in the wind. Let's see if I can get it close to the camera. Got a bit of sun here, but don't let that fool you. It was raining about 3 minutes ago. That getting pushed back. Oh, it is getting blown around in that wind. Let's go for acro. All of a sudden it's gone gale force on me. Thank you. Seems okay. This is not the weather to be flying this one in. You see that backflip I did then? The wind just got under it. But that happens when you have these prop protectors, you see. It's a surface area then. I have no idea what the battery's doing. I think it's going to be alright. I keep telling myself that. Oh, the wind's horrible. Okay. Let's come in for a landing, and I don't know if I'll do FPV with it today, but obviously I will at some point, but it's not like in this wind, but it is very windy. So the view from the FPV cam is quite nice. It's tilted back a little bit to give us a little bit of speed, and I didn't get much chance to fly this one FPV, sadly, and you'll see why in a bit. But there's a little bit of vibration coming through from the propellers, but not as much as I thought. It's a nice flyer, this one, and I think it would be good as an intermediate model, especially with those cages on there protecting the props. The tune wasn't too bad, but you can see there as it loses height, it does that dipping back thing that models with these big cages tend to do. I think it's just the flight controller getting upset with the amount of drag. You could probably tune that out. But anyway, you're about to see it go into a roll of death, and here is why. So I thought it was a brownout at first, but one of the motors had its wires completely severed at the base, and it was game over, sadly. Now, I was wondering why this was, and this particular motor doesn't seem to have any heat shrink over it at the base, and I think perhaps the vibrations caused them to cut off. You can see this other motor here, it has got a heat shrink. So sadly, that was my very short flight with the GB90, but from what I could tell from flying it, it actually wasn't a bad flight at all. It doesn't have a huge amount amount of power. I don't think I'd go and put a 4-cell battery on it, but yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I think maybe the drag from the propellers overlapping maybe sort of bogs it down a little bit, but it doesn't make it unstable at all. But as I say, maybe a little bit of a quality control issue there with my motor, but happily not a flip of death. So there you go, that is my review of the GB90 brushless micro. I'll put a link in the description if you wish to get one. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.